Okay, let's look at the 50-year mortgage that has been in the headlines the past few days. For this exercise, I'm using the current rates that I found when I did this: 5.8 for a 15, 6.3 for a 30, and TBD for a 50. You know, who knows? Scenario one is what would happen today if you went out and bought a house, 10% down, 6.3 on a 30. Your payment's $27.85. Then I kept the interest rate the same and I just bumped it to a 50-year mortgage, and your payment is $24.69. That is saving you $316 per month. And I want you to start to think about that figure as we walk through the rest of these slides, and just keep it in the back of your head. And then for this third scenario, I said, okay, if a 50-year mortgage comes out, and let's just say it matches the same rate as a 30-year, then what do rates currently need to do to match that? And the answer is a 5.3 interest rate. If you scrap to the 50-year idea and you lowered rates by 1 point, it would only be $29 more than the 50-year mortgage at 6.3. It would be $286 less than the 30-year mortgage at 6.3, with a monthly payment of $24.98. So what is the point? The point is what I just said. If you lower interest rates by 1 point, it has the same effect as introducing a 50-year mortgage option for borrowers. So why not lower rates? The market is slower, but we're not in dire times. Prices and rates both need to come down, but introducing a 50-year mortgage is not going to achieve either of those goals. Prices and interest rates are always pulling at each other, and interest rates will yank on prices. As a homeowner, interest rates matter, but what you care about more is your home value. We are relying on the value of our homes to always be increasing over time. There's a couple key words in that, but the one I picked is relying. Real estate over the medium and long term has always been considered safe and well-performing as an investment. What are we seeing in our current climate right now? We have high interest rates along with high prices. Why aren't rates coming down? Well, it's pretty simple. The market and the economy believe that prices are still too high from the immense amount of appreciation that took place from 2020 to 2022. So as frustrating as high rates are, the goal of them right now is to slow down appreciation and bring prices down as much as possible without causing too much harm. And a sidebar here, why haven't high rates done this quicker? After all, we're really 3.5 years in to high rates. It only took, and we're barely seeing any depreciation. We've really just kind of, at least here in the Nashville market, have flatlined. 2020 to 2022, we saw this crazy amount of appreciation. Well, the answer is, and I'll tie back into this at the end, interest rates are not the sole reason for the immense amount of appreciation we saw. So it wasn't the only factor, which means it's not just going to immediately have this opposite effect where it tanks prices. We don't want prices to tank anyways. After all, the goal here is to make up for the immense appreciation and for, yes, prices to come down as much as the market will bear. So back to the point of caring about your home value more than you care about interest rates. The ability for real estate to continue to be a safe and reliable investment is contingent upon allowing the market to naturally resolve from our own human error with as little intervention as needed. Not no intervention. Intervention isn't bad if it's needed. So let's dive into the numbers with a 50-year mortgage. On average, a 15-year mortgage is 0.5 point lower than a 30-year. So in these two examples, you can see that the difference in the mortgage payment on a $500,000 home is almost $1,000. It's going to cost you $963.52 more a month to have a 15-year mortgage. However, by doing a 15-year mortgage, you're going to save $327,000 in interest payments over the life of the loan. Right below that, you can see the total interest paid. We have a 50-year mortgage. The rate will not be the same as the 30. Banks are going to have to figure out what rate to charge. And I'm sure there's lots of air quotes legitimate analysis that go into this calculation, but you have to look at the bank's profit. Is there a reason that this 15-year mortgage isn't more competitive? And I'm skipping it real quick, but statistically, roughly 90% of home loans that are originated are for 30-year mortgages. Why? 9 out of 10 buyers choose to pay less a month, but overall, astronomically higher interest. Why is that? Well, it has to do with the separation in that monthly payment. If 15-year monthly payments competed more with 30-year payments, people would opt to a 15-year mortgage. Banks would make less money and secondary markets would be less interested. It comes back to bank profit. So with a 50-year mortgage, what's the sweet spot going to be? It's got to drop your payment low enough to where a 30-year mortgage is no longer desirable. In parentheses here, this should help keep 50-year rates closer to 30-year rates, and I'm going to show you why. First, I'm running it at that same half-point difference that the 15 and the 30-year have. And you can tell, looking at these, it's a $146 difference a month. If you were to have a current rate of 6.3 and offer a 50-year at 6.8, you're saving the borrower, not the accurate word, but whatever, air quotes around saving, $146 a month. But ultimately, that borrower is paying over $500,000 more in interest. And right there below that is the amount of interest paid in full on each of those loans. So I look at this and I immediately think there's no way they can charge half a point higher. You would be very foolish to choose that option and pay $500,000 more in interest and only not pay $146 more per month. Also, let's talk about the air quotes of the life of a loan. It is very obvious the amount of interest paid between a 15 and a 30. It's enormous. It's an enormous difference. But a lot of people say, oh, no one stays in their home for 30 years. It's like, okay, well, the median time spent in a home in the US is 11 years. So running those scenarios again, you can tell at year 11 what you've paid in interest for each of those options. For a 15-year at 5.8, for a 30 at 6.3, and for a 50 at 6.8. This is it broken down again. And if you want to pause it and look, you can see the amount of principal paid. It is scary, the amount of principal that you pay on a 50-year and how little it is by year 11. Let's sell these homes. So assuming 3.5% appreciation per year in real estate, which is a little bit less than what real estate has performed at over the last 30 years, it's closer to 4% on average. You now have a house that's worth $725,000. On a 15-year mortgage, you've got over $500,000 in equity. On a 30-year mortgage, you've got $355,000. And on a 50-year mortgage, you have $292,000. So what if the 50-year rate saved enough to create the same 90-10 choice that we have in our current market with a 15 versus a 30-year? Well, to look at that, let's grab that second scenario where we kept the interest rate the same, and this comes back to the question that I was asking you to hold on to. Is $316 enough? Would that move the needle? The talking heads are saying that 50-year rates they have to be higher. The bank's invested for a longer period of time, and the payments are stretched out longer, so naturally they're going to be higher. But what is that number? Also, just for fun, what if they offered it lower? Let's just take a 15-year rate at 5.8 and just plug that one in on 50 years. Your payment would be $482 less than a 30-year at 6.3. And the bank is still going to make almost double what they would make. Is $382 enough to move that needle to a 90-10 where 9 out of 10 buyers are going to go with a 50 instead of a 30. If a 50-year mortgage is introduced, will banks be happy offering a lower rate and still almost doubling their profit? Or are they going to find, that perfect sweet spot, saving you enough money to do it, but making the optimal amount of money they can make? So, in conclusion, what have we learned throughout these slides? 1, lowering interest rates by a point will have the same effect on mortgage payments as introducing a 50-year mortgage at the same rate as a 30-year. Could have stopped this entire presentation there. That is enough for me to say that a 50-year mortgage is not worth it. It's not worth doing. Why is it? Why? 1 point's not very big. We're going to see 1 point fluctuations. You just got to be patient. We've already seen 1 point fluctuations. They've just been from an 8 to a 7 and a 7.5 to a 6. We've seen 1 point fluctuations. We will continue. We're going to see, in my opinion, rates in the 5s and in the high 4s, maybe even in the low 4s. I don't think that's unrealistic. But the market thinks that prices are too high. And the people that are in office at the Fed also agree with that, which is why they're not wanting to encourage too much buying, which is why they're not lowering rates. The 50-year mortgage idea is an attempt to rush and fix a problem that really doesn't exist and doesn't need to be fixed, in my opinion. It also has potential of creating additional problems down the road. 2, people will choose the lower monthly payment option. If banks make the right calculations, the 30-year will become obsolete to the 50-year. The bottom line, people shop their monthly payment. This is a fact. We know it's a fact because we just walked through the exercise looking at the amount of money that a borrower pays in interest, yet 9 out of 10 buyers will still choose a 30-year over a 15. And you can get deeper here. Is it poor financial education? Is it the difference in the quality and condition and size and location of the home that you can get with that difference? It's an option, but is it even really a choice? It doesn't really seem like it's a choice. It seems that it's purposely kept out of reach. 3, the longer banks loan you money, the more they make, the less you own. And I've got here the interest that you pay over the life of a loan on a 50 and a 30 and over 11 years. And again, I'm not even including the equity, which is really it's just as scary, if not more scary, depending on who you are and how you want to look at it. But the amount of equity that you pay on a 50-year is disturbingly low in the first 11 years. So what is the American dream? Is it owning a home, or is it making banks wealthier than they already are? When you go to buy your first home, you spend almost every dime you have to get into it. Your down payment is practically all of your savings. It's dipping into your emergency fund if you even have an emergency fund. Nowadays, 5 to 10% is a very respectable down payment for a first-time home buyer. So using this $500,000 house that we've used, say you put 10% down, $50,000, you make your payments, 11 years later, you're ready to sell, and you have earned $355,000 in equity. On a $50,000 investment, that's almost 20% return per year. That's creating wealth. You lived, you had a roof over your head, and you added $350,000 to your net worth. So what's the point? In my opinion, there is no point to a 50-year mortgage. It does not help the American borrower as much as it hurts them. The short-term benefit isn't even close to outweighing the long-term effects. And it's kind of the opposite of what Trump's saying. Trump wants rates to be lower. He wants things to be more affordable. And if you were to just immediately introduce a 50-year mortgage, 2 things are going to happen. 1, they're saying that banks are going to offer it at a higher rate because it's stretched out longer. So rates are not going to be lower. Would it maybe bump the 30-year rate down by just its introduction alone? Maybe. But rates are not going to be lower. And then prices. If we know that people shop by payment, if there's now this huge separation created out of nothing, and borrowers are now able to afford more, prices are going to go up. So it's not really, I don't see what it's solving. The market is not in a terrible position. Instead of trying to control it, we should be just listening to it more. Like I said in the beginning, little intervention is the goal. It's not, if we need it, okay, but I don't think we need it. You could argue that major intervention is what created this problem. The immense amount of money printed during COVID, you could argue, was why we saw the real estate market explode nationwide and why inflation peaked at 9%. That was intervention that in hindsight probably wasn't needed to the extent that it was. Probably needed some sort of intervention, not that much. A 50-year mortgage is only going to make banks richer and Americans poorer.